now what?
Ezra chapter 9.
Ezra chapter 9. We are going to start in verse 5 because we've done the first 4 verses last week. But to get us caught up, Ezra has gotten to Jerusalem. All the precious metals and stuff that they had carried on their journey, they have given accounting for. A little bit of time has passed, and Ezra has gotten word that the men of Judah had married heathen women. And Ezra was to the point where he was pulling out his hair and ripping his clothes because of the anguish that that news brought him. So that's kind of where we left off there after verse 4. You all right?
Terry's talking. I can't hear you.
You all right? Oh, I didn't hear him say anything. Okay. Anyway, so we're going to pick up today in verse 5, and hopefully we can get through the rest of 9 and all of 10 today. If we don't, we'll finish next week. But Ezra is so distraught over this news that the men of Judah, some of the men of Judah, have married these heathen pagan women that it needs to be dealt with, and we're going to see what happens unfold here in these 2 chapters. Understand that God had given a command to Judah to not marry any that weren't from Israel. And so we see here that has happened some 100 years after the restoration of the temple and the freedom or the ability to return back to Jerusalem and begin again their Jewish lifestyle, so to speak. And so within that 100-year period, why we've got these mixed multitudes now intermingled in with the people of Judah. And so that's why Ezra is so distraught. So that being said, we're coming here now to chapter 9, verse 5, and that's where we're going to start. And I'm afraid this may be way loud, so if it is, I will take care of it. So Ezra 9, verse 5.
At the evening sacrifice
not
I
bad.
arose up from my heaviness, and having rent my garment and my mantle,
I don't wonder if it's not
I
loud.
fell upon my knees, and spread out my hands unto the Lord my God, and said, O my God, I am ashamed, and blush to lift up my face to thee, my God. For our iniquities are increased over our head, and our trespass is grown up unto the heavens. Since the days of our fathers have we been in a great trespass unto this day. And for our iniquities have we, our kings and our priests, been delivered into the hand of the kings of the lands, to the sword, to captivity, and to a spoil, and to confusion of face, as it is this day.
So Ezra is recounting not only the sin that is currently been infecting the Jews, but also the sins of the past, which ultimately led up to them being captive in Babylon for 70 years back under Nebuchadnezzar. And so he's even hearkening back to the battles that even Joshua faced and the judges and the things that Israel went through even under them and even under King David or under King Saul. Sorry. And so he's recounting all of these sins that has been in Judah, and God was gracious to them and allowed them after their captivity to be restored afresh with a rebuilt temple, and now we've went back to the sins of our fathers. Now understand, Ezra was not involved in these sins, but he is so distraught over it. And, in some ways, we as a church should be distraught over the sins of others when it causes grievous issues in the life of the church or even in the life of families. Now, that's not to say that we're supposed to pick and pick everybody else's sins and not overlook our own. But we see here the heaviness that Ezra has over the sins of the people, which is, that again, should have an effect on us as well. When we see people in sin, it ought to affect us in some way, reaching out to the Lord for Him to help and to intervene and to set people back right. And that's what Ezra is doing here as well. So, but he's hearkening back to all the sins of the past from Israel, all the way from, again, and even in the land of the wilderness, and even back to Egypt, that he's hearkening back to the sins of his fathers. Verse 9, or 8. 8.
And now for a little space grace hath been shown from the Lord our God to leave us a remnant to escape, and to give us a nail in his holy place, that our God may lighten our eyes, and give us a little reviving in our bondage.
Ezra recognizes that God has been very gracious in all things, and even in the sins of the people, he's been very gracious. And we can look back on our lives. Every one of us say, boy, God's sure been good to me. Regardless of what we've been through, we ought to be able to look back, boy, God has been gracious to me. Thank the Lord. And so Ezra is not discounting how gracious God has been, but that still does not cover up the fact that Israel, or the Jews at this point, are in terrible sin, which we'll talk about as we go through this. But we need to acknowledge that, boy, the Lord's been good. Verse 9.
For we were bondmen, yet our God hath not forsaken us in our bondage, but hath extended mercy unto us in the sight of the kings of Persia, to give us a reviving, to set up the house of our God, and to repair the desolations thereof, and to give us a wall in Judah and in Jerusalem. And now, O our God, what shall we say after this? For we have forsaken thy commandments, which thou hast commanded by thy servants, the prophets, saying, The land unto which ye go to possess it is an unclean land, with the filthiness of the people of the lands, with their abominations, which have filled it from one end to another with their uncleanness. Now therefore, give not your daughters unto their sons, neither take their daughters unto your sons, nor seek their peace or their wealth for ever, that ye may be strong, and eat the good of the land, and leave it for an inheritance to your children forever.
All right, so let's turn back to Exodus chapter 34. Let's get a little context for this. God gives command to Moses in Exodus 34 here. And at this point, they're getting ready to, they're preparing to go into the land, which we're all familiar with the history. They don't, and they got to wait nearly 40 years before they can. But God is preparing them to go into Canaan, and God gives Moses this command here in Exodus 34, beginning in verse 12. Take heed to thyself, lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land whither thou goest, lest it be for a snare in the midst of thee. So God is telling Moses, don't treat these people kindly. And again, God had told them to kill them all. Now, we may not have an understanding of that command, but that's what God told Moses, and that's what God told Joshua. And then Joshua didn't. More on that later, perhaps. But nevertheless, don't make a covenant with these people, because they're going to be a snare to you. Verse 13. But ye shall destroy their altars, break their images, and cut down their groves. These people were idol worshipers. They were pagans. They were heathens. And God commands them to tear it all down. Now keep in mind where we're at here in Ezra chapter 9. What have they done? They've married these people. More on that in a moment. Verse 14. For thou shalt worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they go a-whoring after other gods, and do sacrifice unto their gods, and one call thee, and thou eat of his sacrifice. And thou take of their daughters unto thy sons, and their daughters go a-whoring after other gods, and make thy sons to go whoring after their gods. Thou shalt make thee no molten gods. So there was a command of God that you're supposed to tear down their idols, tear down their places of worship, and do not mingle with these people. And here we are from this point some 1,000 years later, perhaps, roughly, in Ezra chapter 10 or 9, and now we've married these people. We've married them. Now, we're going to build on that thought here, but that was a command. I also want us to go to Deuteronomy chapter 7. Deuteronomy chapter 7. And I'm not going to read these to you. I'm just going to bring this out to your attention. In verses 1 through 6, is reiterating what we just read in Exodus 34. This is the same command, all right, given by the Lord, that they are not to marry these people. They're not to mingle with them. They're not to deal with them. They're to tear down their altars. But I want you to understand that it's reiterated here in Deuteronomy chapter 7 as well. The same command that we read in Exodus 34 is given again in Deuteronomy chapter 7. So, with that being said, now let's go back to Ezra chapter 9, and I'm going to look here at verse 12 again. Now therefore, give not your daughters to their sons, neither take their daughters unto your sons, nor seek their peace or their wealth forever, that ye may be strong and eat the good of the land and leave it for an inheritance for your children forever. That was the command. And again, we just referenced those original commands in Exodus and in Deuteronomy. They didn't do that. After all those years, after all the things that Israel has been through, within 100 years of them coming back to Jerusalem and rededicating the temple and reaffirming all of the laws that God had given, they're married into these pagan people of the land. Verse 13.
And after all that has come upon us for our evil deeds, and for our great trespass, seeing that thou, our God, hath punished us less than our iniquities deserve, and hast given us such deliverance as this, should we again break thy commandments, and join in affinity with the people of these abominations? Wouldst not thou be angry with us, till thou hast consumed us, so that there should be no remnant nor escaping? O Lord God of Israel, thou art righteous, for we remain yet escaped, as it is this day. Behold, we are before thee in our trespasses, for we cannot stand before thee because of this.
All right, that's the confession of Ezra. When I read this week, this phrase stuck out to me in verse 13. Thou, our God, hast punished us less than our iniquities deserve. That really, when I read, I don't know how many times I read this week, but at one point, I forgot what day it was. I think Tuesday. I read that, and that just hit me. That no matter what I've been through, it's been less than I deserve because of the sin that I have in my life. And you all could say the same thing. I mean, it's not just one person here, but it's all of us. God has been gracious and kind, even when we disobey and even when we do our own thing. And in much the same way here with Judah, God has been gracious and kind to these people, even in spite of their sins and iniquities. Comments or questions on anything in verse or chapter 9? Kind of got it hanging here. Hi, baby. All right, let's look at chapter 10. We got a remedy for this. Whoops. Hold on a minute. So this was Ezra, and all this consternation and this astonishment of what he's heard. Now we're going to have a remedy. Verse 1 of chapter 10.
Now when Ezra had prayed, and when he had confessed, weeping and casting himself down before the house of God, there assembled unto him out of Israel a very great congregation of men and women and children, for the people wept very sore.
Now understand, I didn't point this out, but in chapter 9, verse 5, this is at the evening sacrifice. So this would be at about 3 p.m.-ish. And so the people are coming to the temple for their evening sacrifice. And what do I want to say? Yeah. I about said Moses again. But we see here, though, that the people are now coming, and they're seeing Ezra in this state of shock and astonishment and anguish. And it says there in verse 1, the people come, and they see him weeping, and it causes them to weep very sore, or very, very much. Verse 2.
And Shechaniah the son of Jehiel, one of the sons of Elam, answered and said unto Ezra, We have trespassed against our God, and have taken strange wives of the people of the land. Yet now there is hope in Israel concerning this thing. Now therefore let us make a covenant with our God to put away all the wives, and such as are born of them, according to the counsel of my Lord, and of those that tremble at the commandment of our God, and let it be done according to the law. Arise, for this matter belongeth unto thee, we also will be with thee. Be of good courage, and do it.
All right, so Shechaniah here tells Ezra. Now keep in mind, at this point, Ezra is the main guy. He's the leader of Judah at this point. He's not king, but he is the leader. He's been the one that has been appointed by the king of Persia to be the leader, and they are recognizing Ezra as such. And Shechaniah says, yes, we have taken strange wives. Verse 3, let us make a covenant with our God and put away all these wives. Divorce them. Yeah, divorce them. Yeah, divorce them. You're jumping ahead, but yes.
Well, it said it in there.
Oh, it did it?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 24. Deuteronomy 24, verse 1. Now keep in mind, well, I'll say that later. Deuteronomy 24:1. When a man hath taken a wife and married her, and it come to pass that she find no favor in his eyes, because he had found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorcement and give it to her hand and send her out of his house. So this is the law that Shechaniah is referring to when he tells Ezra that we need to put these unclean women out. Okay, that's the law that he's referring to. You just, yeah,
Little note.
yeah, just a note.
Days were simpler back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do what now? Oh, I'm sure they knew that they weren't. That, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Shechaniah, he tells Ezra, let's put these wives away. And notice what he says there in verse 4. Arise, for this matter belongs to you, talking about Ezra. We also will be with you. Be of good courage and do it. So Shechaniah has given his right hand of approval, saying, hey, let's do this. I've got your back. I'm with you, behind you 100%. All right? So this is what's going to begin to transpire here, is the divorcement of all these Jewish men from the tribe of Judah from these pagan women. Now, I will say, fast forward to Jesus' time, and there were men of Israel that were putting away their wives for the slightest thing. So they were using this, well, I find her as unclean because she burnt my toast, or whatever, trivial little matter, just something to find a reason to divorce. Now, that's not at all what that command was for, and the command that we live under today is not like these commandments, which I'll touch on here after a while. But understand that this was a law given specifically to Israel concerning marrying pagans that they were going to be around. And we somehow have the same law today that we'll talk about when we get to 1 Corinthians, but I want us to understand that God has not deemed that we are to divorce an unbelieving spouse. Again, I'll talk about that here in just a little bit, okay? But that was the law for Israel at this time, was to divorce, to put away these unclean women, which they were because they were not turning to the Lord. All right? So now let's go to verse 5.
Then arose Ezra, and made the chief priests, the Levites, and all Israel to swear that they should do according to this word. And they swear.
I should have stopped earlier after verse 5. But notice, Ezra stands up with the chief priests, the Levites, and all Israel to swear that they would do this according to the word, and they swear. So Ezra has presented this case, and they have all agreed that this is what needs to be done. Okay? Verse 6.
Then Ezra rose up from before the house of God, and went into the chamber of Johanan the son of Eliashib. And when he came thither, he did eat no bread, nor drink water, for he mourned because of the transgression of them that had been carried away. And they made proclamation throughout Judah and Jerusalem unto all the children of the captivity, that they should gather themselves together unto Jerusalem, and that whosoever would not come within 3 days, according to the counsel of the princes and the elders, all his substance should be forfeited, and himself separated from the congregation of those that had been carried away.
This was a big deal. They made a proclamation throughout all Judah, which was probably the area. I'm going to throw out a estimate here, perhaps the size of Crawford and Lawrence County, just to kind of give us some kind of context. Perhaps not even that large of an area, okay? So it's not like they're going throughout the entirety of Israel or Canaan. They're in Judah, okay? So just kind of some sort of context as to how large this area was. But they've sent out a proclamation that everyone should gather themselves to Jerusalem within 3 days. Now, things were a little different back then, right? Because we're going to see that they all showed up in Jerusalem, which we'll see that in a moment. And if you don't show up, you're going to lose, you're going to forfeit everything, and you're going to be cast out of the assembly, or you're going to be cast out of the congregation of Judah. So this was a pretty big, and it's a pretty severe punishment. Okay? Now, verse 9.
Then all the men of Judah and Benjamin gathered themselves together unto Jerusalem within 3 days. It was the 9th month, on the 20th day of the month. And all the people sat in the street of the house of God, trembling because of this matter, and for the great rain.
All right, so I have it. My notes have this marked as December 8th, 457 BC. All right? But notice, the 9th month, the 20th day, all the people sat in the street of the house of God, so they're around this. They're not in the temple per se, but they're around it. And they're trembling because they know what's coming, and also because it's rainy. Now, just being rainy would be enough to make a guy aggravated. Yeah, in December, the cold Kentucky rain is falling here. Some guy. Alexis, did you get that? Yeah. Yeah. Anyway,
She can't help that she was born in
I
2001.
I understand.
3, whatever.
Wow.
Yeah.
The 1900s. Anyway, I had to get that reference in there. We're not going to get finished if I keep doing that. So notice, they're all trembling because of what's going to happen. Plus, the weather is not cooperative here. All right? It's not like they're all under a shelter. But this is what's going to begin to transpire here in verse 10.
And Ezra the priest stood up and said unto them, Ye have transgressed, and taken strange wives to increase the trespass of Israel. Now therefore, make confession unto the Lord God of your fathers, and do his pleasure, and separate yourselves from the people of the land, and from the strange wives. Then all the congregation answered and said with a loud voice, As thou hast said, so must we do. But the people are many, and it is a time of much rain, and we are not able to stand without, neither is this a work of 1 day or 2, for we are many that have transgressed in this thing.
So the people are all agreeing that yes, we need to do this, have these divorces, but not today. There's too many people here for it to be handled correctly. It's pouring down rain, and it's just not feasible for us to do all this today. It isn't convenient. So, but they apparently the group here was supportive of this thought that we need to clean up our act. We need to divorce our wives, and in that, yes, I haven't mentioned that, but they are going to send their children away in a similar fashion that Hagar and Ishmael were sent out. Hagar, when she was left of Abram and Sarah, she took Ishmael with her because she was his mother. And so in the same fashion, this is what's going to happen with these people. Some of these folks had children with these pagan women, and so the women are going to be taking the children. Verse 14.
Let now our rulers of all the congregation stand, And let all them which have taken strange wives in our cities come at appointed times, and with them the elders of every city, and the judges thereof, until the fierce wrath of our God for this matter be turned from us. Only Jonathan the son of Asahel and Jahaziah the son of Tikvah were employed about this matter. And Meshullam and Shabbathai the Levite helped them.
Now, I've had trouble with this verse 15 all week. The word employed here is translated from a word that means was against. Now, I'm not for sure why the translators decided to use the word employed, but they were against. But the scripture and none of the commentators had a definite answer here. If they were against this whole process, or if they were against the delay in doing it over time. Nevertheless, we do see here some men that were against the idea of one or the other. And again, we're not really for sure how this translation was played out. We don't really know what they were against. But we will see there were many of the leaders of Judah that were involved in these divorce proceedings, so to speak. All right? And verse 16.
The children of the captivity did so, and Ezra the priest, with certain chief of the fathers after the house of their fathers, and all of them by their names, were separated, and sat down in the first day of the 10th month to examine the matter. And they made an end with all the men that had taken strange wives by the first day of the first month.
Now, if you're really clued in on this whole thing, this has now been exactly 1 year to the day since Ezra has left Babylon to go to Jerusalem. So, it took him 5 months to get there from Babylon to Jerusalem. And so this whole process has taken, from the time he left till the time all this is settled, has been exactly 1 year. Just thought something I'd bring out there. But we do see here that over the course of a few months, these matters were weighed and the decisions made, and the divorces have been final. We do see here I haven't read verse 18 yet, have I? Verse 18.
And among the sons of the priests there were found that had taken strange wives, namely of the sons of Jeshua, the son of Jozadak, and his brethren, Maaseiah, and Eleazar, and Jerib, and Gedaliah.
So even in amongst the priests that were doing the Lord's work in the temple, were involved in this sin of marrying pagan women. So it wasn't just the common everyday farmer out in the middle of Judah somewhere hoeing his field. This affected from the top all the way down. Now, following here is a list of 113 names of men that were involved in this. So in the grand scheme of all of Judah, perhaps 113 isn't many. Nevertheless, with many of the leaders being involved in this sin, that was what was the most heinous. Is that a word? Not heinous. Heinous. What is heinous? Heinous is when you talk to the queen, right?
Your
Yeah.
Highness.
No, say the word again.
Heinous.
Heinous. Yeah. It made it. Not sure where I was going with that. Anyway, with the leaders being involved in that, it made it more worse. There you go. Hyena. Now, before we read the names of these men that were involved in this, let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 7. I want to put this in modern day context here for how we are to deal. So God has given us Christians a command that we aren't to marry non-Christians. But we all are aware that happens. But God has a process for this, and it is spelled out here, beginning in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 10. Unto the married I command, yet not I, but the Lord, let not the wife depart from her husband. But, and if she depart, let her remain unmarried, or be reconciled to her husband, and let not the husband put away his wife. But to the rest speak I, not the Lord. Now what he means by that phrase is, the Lord did not address this problem specifically. That's what he's meaning there. If any brother hath a wife that believes not, and she be pleased to dwell with him, let him not put her away. Okay? So if a Christian man has a wife that's unmarried, he is not to seek, unsaved, he is not to put her away. If she's fine dwelling with him and living under his roof and under his leadership and all that, he's not to put her away. Okay? And the woman which hath a husband that believes not, if he be pleased to dwell with her, let her not leave him. So if we do have a mixed marriage in our day, we're not to separate just because we're not both Christian. Okay? If they're both satisfied to live with the other, then let that marriage remain. Verse 14, for the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, not sanctified to salvation, but is living under the blessings that the Lord gives to that household because there is a Christian in that house. That's what that's referring to. And the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband, else were your children unclean, but now are they holy. So a Christian spouse in a house makes that a Christian household, even if one is blatantly pagan, okay? The Lord will bless a Christian household if there's a Christian in it, obviously. All right? Verse 15, but if the unbelieving depart, let him depart. A brother or sister is not under bondage in such case, but God hath called us to peace. So if an unbelieving spouse wants to leave, you let him leave. And then the remaining spouse is not under bondage and can go ahead and get remarried. So this is a difference between what those of Judah were facing than what it is for us today. All right? Now, we are not to seek a divorce just because she burns the toast or the man doesn't put his socks in the hamper. All right? But there's a multitude of things we could talk about what would be logical for a divorce and what wouldn't. I'm not going to do that today. But understand, in a mixed house, if they're both wanting to stay together, if the unsaved wants to stay with the saved, then they remain married. Understand, it's not up to the saved person. Okay? It's the one that's unsaved. If he wants to leave or she wants to leave, then they go in peace. All right? But that's how we live under it today. Okay? And that's 1 Corinthians 7, 10 through 15. So, that being said, now we're back to Ezra chapter 10. And yes, we will let Max read all these names because I really like hearing him read these names. I don't know, maybe you guys don't, but you can turn your... Yeah. Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry. Uh-huh. Right. So they came and they met and they decided that they were going to do this, put it off a little bit for the rain to settle down and for a group to be able to manage all this. And so that all began on the first day of the 10th month. So that, well, I believe, and I don't know that it's really spelled out here, I think they went back home and then it was left up to the leadership of the cities. Well, I had to leave that to Dan there for that. But there was about a 3-week period by the time they met in Jerusalem until the time the proceedings began. So whether they actually began in Jerusalem or took place in their various cities, my mind isn't recalling how that all played out. It may actually be here, and I just can't see it here. But anyway, it did take them about 3 weeks to get the formalities began. And then it took from the first day of the 10th month to the first day of the first month. So, anyhow. Well, that it's not specifically spelled out here when we get to verse 44, but it is also assumed because that was a command, and that's what Abraham did to Hagar and Ishmael. He provided their provision, and so it is assumed that the women and children involved in this were taken care of in the sending away. Ezra does a poor job here of just kind of leaving us hanging, because when we get to verse 44, it's like, I don't have anything else to write. And I would have really liked to have had a chapter 11. Yeah, perhaps, yeah. So anyway, verse 18 of Ezra 10.
And they gave their hands that they would put away.
Oh,
their wives,
19.
And being guilty, they offered a ram of the flock of their trespass.
So they are giving a sacrifice here.
And of the sons of Emir, Hananiah and Zebediah, and of the sons of Harim, Maaseiah and Elijah, and Shemaiah and Jehiel and Uzziah, and of the sons of Pashur, Elioenai, Maaseiah, Ishmael, Nathaniel, Jozabad, and Elasa. Also of the Levites, Jozabad and Shimei, and Kelaiah, the same as Kelita, Pethiah, Judah, and Eleazar. Of the singers also, Eliashib, and of the porters, Shalom, and Telem, and Uri. Moreover of Israel, of the sons of Parosh, Ramiah, and Josiah, and Malchiah, and Miamin, and Eleazar, and Malchijah, and Benaiah. And of the sons of Elam, Mattaniah, Zechariah, and Jehiel, and Abdi, and Jeremoth, and Eliah. And of the sons of Zatu, Elionaiah, Eliashib, Mattaniah, and Jeremoth, and Zabad, and Azizah. Of the sons also of Bebai, Jehohanan, Hananiah, Zabbai, and Athli. And of the sons of Bani, Meshullam, Maluk, Adaiah, Jeshub, and Sheal, and Ramoth. And of the sons of Path, Moab, Adnah, Jalal, Benaiah, Maaseiah, Mattaniah, Bezaliel, and Binuai, and Manasseh. And of the sons of Harim, Eleazar, Ashijah, Malchiah, Shemaiah, Shimeon, Benjamin, Maluk, and Shemariah. Of the sons of Hashum, Mattaniah, Mattatha, Zabad, Eliphalet, Jeremiah, Manasseh, and Shimei. Of the sons of Bani, Maddai, Amram, and Uel. Benaiah, Bedaiah, Chelah, Benaiah, Meremoth, Eliashib, Mattaniah, Mattanai, and Jasu, and Bani, and Binui, and Shimei, and Shelemiah, and Nathan, and Adaiah, Machnadebai, Shashai, Sherai, Azriel, and Shelemiah, Shemariah, Shalom, Amariah, and Joseph.
Now, these names, perhaps just sitting here today, don't mean anything to us. But I want us to understand that these are people, and yeah, they don't have a name like Jim or Lee or Bob or whoever. But these are people, these are families, and even though perhaps we sit here and think, man, there's no way I can pronounce that, just understand that there is at least one person, Max McLean, that can pronounce these with seemingly little effort. I don't understand it, but there was a lot of guys named Shimei, and a lot of seemingly more than one Manasseh. But I want us to turn, I'm not going to read anymore, but just in Ezra chapter 2, I want us to just go there for a moment. And I know we're running close on time. I'll be done. Beginning in verse 3. All the way down through 63. Here's a list of names that really, for the most part, mean nothing to us, but yet they made an accounting of a list of people that went from Babylon back to Judah. And to have your name, have my family's name written here, would cause great pride in knowing that my family was one of the first families to go from captivity back home when we were allowed. On the flip side, when you get to chapter 10, well, yeah, my dad here, Benaiah, yeah, he married a pagan woman. Yada, yada, yada. I'm just saying so we see the differences in the two lists of names. One would cause pride in the family, and perhaps the other list would cause shame or regret in the family. Not all of them, but some of them. There were 17 priests, 10 Levites who worked at the temple, and then 86 other people. So there were 113 listed here.